Again, my theme for today is finding balance, and we're going to be looking at 1 Samuel chapter 22, verses 6 through 23. And a brief introduction. Amidst the chaos and uncertainty, we find ourselves facing difficult choices. As we navigate through life, we are forced to weigh our own needs against our desires and our obligations to others, especially our leaders. And today we're going to explore this very dilemma through the story found in 1 Samuel 22. Some background. Fleeing for his life, from Saul, David went to the city of Nob alone to meet Ahimelech, the priest. David had told Ahimelech that he was on a mission from the king Saul, which was a lie, and requested some bread and asked if there was a sword available. He said he was in such a rush he had no armor, which was another lie. Ahimelech gave David some bread as long as he and his men had stayed away from women, which David assured Ahimelech that they were all clean. Another lie, because David was actually alone at that particular moment. Ahimelech, he gave the sword of Goliath, unaware that David was being pursued by Saul. Meanwhile, Doeg the Edomite, he was also present at Nob at the time, and he reported David's presence in Nob to Saul. Now, in this context, David was alone, desperate for food and protection. He told Ahimelech that he was on a mission from King Saul when he was actually fleeing from Saul's army. There's 4 segments to the story. Verses 6 through 8, the limits of loyalty. Verses 9 through 13, the consequences of blind obedience. Verses 14 through 19, the importance of justice. And our last segment is verse 20 through 23, the strength of bonds. So we'll jump right into our first segment, verses 6 through 8, the limits of loyalty. Verse 6, when Saul heard that David and his men who were with him had been discovered. Now Saul, he was staying in Gilboa under this tamarack tree in Ramah with a spear in his hand and all his servants standing about him. Now Saul, he's very angry. He's upset because he found out David was hiding from him. He's sitting under this special tamarack tree, which is a type of tree that grows in the desert. Saul had a spear in his hand, which means he's ready to fight and defend himself. He also has many helpers that are surrounding him who are loyal to him. And this verse is important because it shows how Saul's emotions are getting the better of him. He's becoming more and more angry, and his anger is turning into paranoia because he feels like David is trying to take his throne. Verse 7, then Saul said to his servants who stood about him, hear now, you Benjamites. Will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards and make you captains of thousands and captains of hundreds? See, he's bribing them to make them loyal to him and not to David by promising them fields and vineyards and making them captains over thousands and hundreds. He's promising that if they remain loyal to him, that he would give all these great things, and that David surely would not. Now Saul's desperate, and he's willing to do whatever it takes to keep his power and position. He's using material wealth and prestige to buy his servants' loyalty, rather than them following him because of his leadership and his character. Verse 8, all of you have conspired against me, and there is no one who reveals to me that my son has made a covenant with the son of Jesse. And there is not one of you who is sorry for me or who reveals to me that my son has stirred up my servants against me, to lie in wait as it is this day? Now he was angry with Jonathan, who made this covenant with David, and no one had told him. And this verse reminded me of Saul's earlier rant in 1 Samuel chapter 20, verses 30 and 31. Then Saul's anger was kindled against Jonathan when he said to him, "You son of a perverse, rebellious woman, do I not know that you have chosen the son of Jesse, not David, to your shame and to the shame of your mother's nakedness?" He was so mad at Jonathan and David that he couldn't even speak the name of David, and refers to him as the son of Jesse. Saul was very upset because he thought that everyone was against him. He said that no one is telling the truth about what's going on with his son Jonathan. Saul's anger isolates him and makes him paranoid, feeling like he has no one around him that cares about him. So an application for this first segment, unlike what Saul tried to do, when you face temptation or pressures to do something, prioritize integrity and loyalty to God over material gain or personal gain. Why it matters? Saul's trying to bribe his servants to stay loyal to him by offering material wealth and prestige. However, it's not a Christ-like approach. As Christians, we should prioritize our loyalty to God and our obedience to Him, even if it's difficult or costly. We should not be swayed by material gains or personal gains. So how do we apply it? Well, take a moment today to reflect on your own motivations and priorities. Ask yourself, what am I prioritizing in my life? Is it material wealth, prestige, maybe relationships? Am I willing to compromise my values or principles for personal gain or popularity? Am I staying loyal to God and His Word, even if it's difficult or challenging? The cross-reference I found for this was found in Matthew 6:19 through 21. Do not store up for yourself treasures on earth where moth and vermin destroy, and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourself treasures in heaven, where moth and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. This cross-reference passage highlights the importance of prioritizing heavenly treasure over earthly treasure. Our second segment, verses 9 through 13, the consequences of blind obedience. Verse 9. Then answered Doeg the Edomite, who was set over the servants of Saul, and said, I saw the son of Jesse go to Nob, to Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub. So Doeg told Saul he's seen David in Nob. He told Saul that David went to visit the priest there. And it's important because Saul's looking for David, and he's angry because nobody except for Doeg is telling him what he wants to hear. Verse 10. And he inquired of the Lord for him, gave him provisions, and gave him the sword of Goliath, the Philistine. Doeg has continued to explain that David asked Ahimelech for bread and for a weapon. Doeg told Saul about David for his own selfish reasons, is what I think, to get on Saul's good side, really. Saul at this point had set him over as servants, and he sees an opportunity to maybe move up the corporate ladders, I guess you could say. Verse 11. So the king sent to call Ahimelech the priest, the son of Ahitub, in all of his father's house, the priests who were in Nob, and they all came to the king. So Saul has called for Ahimelech to get to the bottom of what's going on. He wants to know if Ahimelech and his family, were they helping David, who's trying to escape from Saul. He's very upset. Ahimelech might be hiding something from him. But unfortunately for Ahimelech, David's lied to him. He's not saying that he's being hunted by Saul. David never told him that. Verse 12. And Saul said, "Hear now, son of Ahitub." He answered, "Here I am, my lord." In other words, Saul saying, "Pay attention to me." And Ahimelech is answering, "Hey, here I am, Lord." Ahimelech is showing respect and said that he's ready to listen to Saul. Verse 13. Then Saul said to him, "Why have you conspired against me, you and the son of Jesse, in that you have given him bread and a sword, and have inquired of God for him, that he should rise against me to lie in wait as it is at this day?" So Saul, he's accusing Ahimelech of helping David, his enemy. He thought that Ahimelech was giving David food and a sword to help him fight against Saul. He also thought that Ahimelech was asking God for advice on how to help David, which Saul didn't like either. Ahimelech has no idea that Saul and David have become enemies. As far as he knew, David was on a mission from Saul. The application I see is, don't jump to conclusions. Saul tried to get information, but because of his anger, he was quick to accuse Ahimelech without knowing the whole truth. Similarly, we often make assumptions about people or situations without having all the facts. We should practice really listening. Really listening and taking the time to gather really all the information before we make a judgment. It's also important not to make judgments when you're angry. Be honest and transparent. Ahimelech was honest and respectful when speaking to Saul. Even though Saul was being accusatory, we should strive to be honest and transparent in our interactions with others, just like Ahimelech. And unlike Saul, we should practice empathy and understanding. Ahimelech was innocent and had no idea that Saul was hunting David. We should strive to understand and empathize with others, even when we don't understand the whole story. Now, here are some specific actions we can take today. Take a few moments to reflect on situations where we maybe have jumped to conclusions or made assumptions about someone or something. If you've done that, then ask God for forgiveness and seek wisdom on how to approach the situation in the future. Like Ahimelech, we should practice being honest and transparent in our actions with others. Ask yourself, is there anything you're hiding or not being truthful about? Remember, living a Christ-like life is a journey that requires intentional effort. By applying these principles, we can become more like Christ and live a life that honors Him. Our third segment, verses 14 through 19, the importance of justice. Verse 14. So Ahimelech answered the king and said, "And who among all your servants is as faithful as David? Who is the king's son-in-law, who goes at your bidding and is honorable in your house?" Ahimelech, he believes David is a faithful servant to Saul, and that David will try to do anything that Saul asks. He believes that David acts honorably. Ahimelech is wondering why Saul is accusing him of doing something. Ahimelech was trying to make Saul see that Saul's being unfair and shouldn't accuse Ahimelech of doing something wrong. Verse 15. Did I then begin to inquire of God for him? Far be it from me. Let not your king impute anything to his servant or to any in the house of my father, for your servant knew nothing of this, little or much. Ahimelech explained that he didn't know that Saul and David had become enemies. He knew nothing of any of the accusations, any of the statements being made against him. Verse 16. And the king said, "You shall surely die, Ahimelech, you and all of your father's house." Saul's words followed a prophecy made by a man of God in 1 Samuel chapter 2, verses 27 through 36. The prophecy said that Eli's sons did not honor God, and they would be punished, and their descendants would be killed. And it's often said that this points to that completion of that prophecy. Verse 17, then the king said to the guards who stood about him, "Turn and kill the priests of the Lord, because their hand also is with David, and because they knew when he fled and did not tell me." But the servants of the king would not lift their hands to strike the priests of the Lord. Now this is a pivotal moment in Saul's story, in the story of Saul's relationship with David and the priests of the Lord. Saul's very angry because he believes the priests were all on David's side and not on his. He felt they should have told him where David fled and not helped David at all. However, the priests, they didn't know anything about David's hiding from Saul because David had lied to him. Now this is the first time in the story where Saul became so angry that he's ordered his men to kill the priests of the Lord. He took his anger to this whole new level. However, the guards, they disobeyed Saul's order to kill the priests, showing that not everyone was willing to follow Saul's command blindly, even if it meant going against the king. This highlights the conflict between Saul's orders and the guards' sense of morality and loyalty to God. The guards were unwilling to carry out Saul's command to kill the priests, even though they were supposed to be loyal to the king. John 16:8 tells us that the Holy Spirit who convicts people to know what is right and wrong, and the guards knew in their hearts that it was wrong to kill the priests, even though Saul commanded them to do it. It's the same with us. We know when something is right or wrong because the Holy Spirit informs our heart. This disobedience by the guards can be seen as a moment of defiance on their part, but it also shows that they were not willing to compromise their values and morals for the sake of following an order. They chose to prioritize their loyalty to God and their sense of justice over their loyalty to Saul. Verse 18, and the king said to Doeg, "You turn and kill the priests." So Doeg the Edomite turned and struck the priests, and killed on that day 85 men who wore the linen ephod. Doeg was willing to forgo God's law and follow Saul's wicked command to kill the priests. The significance of Doeg being a man from Edom is that Edom is a neighboring nation to Israel. The Edomites were considered enemies of Israel. In fact, the Bible records several conflicts between Israelites and Edomites throughout history. And in this context, it's noteworthy that Saul, who was the king of Israel, chose an Edomite to carry out the command to kill the priests. Now, this may suggest that Saul was willing to do whatever it took to get rid of his enemies, even if it meant seeking help from someone who was not part of his own people. Verse 19. Also Nob, the city of priests, he struck with the edge of the sword, both men, women, children, nursing infants, oxen, donkeys, sheep, with the edge of the sword. Doeg proceeded to kill not just the priests of Nob, but also the men, women, children, and even the nursing infants. He killed the animals, he killed everything and everyone. The slaughter of the priests of Nob by Saul's order raises an important question about the moral limits of loyalty and obedience to authority. Was Saul's actions justified in the name of national security, or was it a result of his own paranoia and fear? Saul was so blinded by his anger and paranoia that he did something terrible and unthinkable. In terms of an application, there are many ideas from this story in our own lives that come to mind. For example, when we're faced with a situation where we are asked to do something that goes against our values or our morals, we should be brave and bold enough to stand up for what's right and refuse to do it. We should not blindly follow orders or authority if it goes against our sense of justice and morality. Instead, we should allow the Spirit to help us make a decision that aligns with what's right, fair, and biblical. We should prioritize a relationship with God and our values over our loyalty to human authority. This application can be implemented in many ways, such as speaking up when we see injustice or wrongdoing. You've heard the statement, see something, say something. Refusing to participate in something that goes against your values and morals is a given. We can stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult or unpopular. Additionally, this passage highlights the importance of seeking justice and fairness in resolving conflicts. Saul's actions were motivated by his anger and his paranoia, rather than a desire for justice. This shows that true justice and fairness can only be achieved when we prioritize values and our morals over our desires and selfish interests. Seeking to understand the perspective of all the parties involved in a conflict, very important. Working towards a fair and just solution rather than seeking just to win or to dominate over someone. Prioritizing empathy and compassion over self-interest and the desire for power. Now, this episode also raises questions about the nature of obedience and authority. Is obedience always absolute? Or is it sometimes necessary to disobey to follow a higher moral principle? How should we balance our loyalty to human authority with our loyalty to God? Should we always make we should always make our first priority loyalty to God and obedience to Him, even if it means disobeying human leadership. I found two cross-references that speak to this issue. Exodus 20, verse 13, the Ten Commandments we all know, which includes, thou shalt not murder. And Deuteronomy 16, verses 18 through 20, the instructions to the judges and the magistrates to uphold justice and fairness, even in the face of opposition and pressures from others. Our fourth and final segment, verses 20 through 23, the strength and bonds. Verse 20, now one of the sons of Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, escaped and fled after David. Even when we're in trouble, we can still find help and escape from danger. Abiathar trusted David enough to join him, and David helped him to stay safe. Verse 21, and Abiathar told David that Saul had killed the Lord's priests. Saul's actions showed that he was moving further and further from God, eventually going against the Lord and the servants of the Lord. By killing the priests, Saul was displaying that he didn't care about God or what God wanted. The verse shows that when we're against God, we're also against what's right and good. Verse 22. So David said to Abiathar, I knew that day when Doeg the Edomite was there that he would surely tell Saul, I have caused the death of all the persons of your father's house. David was taking responsibility for his actions. He wasn't trying to blame someone else or to make excuses. He acknowledges that he made a mistake by visiting and lying to the priests of Nob, and that's why they were murdered. So what does this mean? Well, when we make a mistake, we should take responsibility for it. We should be honest with ourselves and others about what happened and how we can do better next time. The cross-reference I found, it was 1 Samuel 23, 6 through 14. In this passage, David is talking to Abiathar again, And he says that he knew he did something wrong by going to Nob. He asked Abiathar to bring the ephod and to ask God what to do next. And this shows that David is still trying to make things right with God. And this cross-reference provides more context about David's actions and how they affect the people around him. It also shows that David is willing to take responsibility for his mistakes and seek God's guidance to make things right. Verse 23, "Stay with me, do not fear, for he who seeks my life seeks your life, but with me you shall be safe." Abiathar's escape and subsequent interactions with David raises important questions about loyalty and survival. Abiathar's decision to flee from Saul and to seek refuge with David is a classic example of the tension between loyalty to one's leader and the need to survive. The story highlights the strength of bonds between individuals and communities. Abiathar's loyalty to David is clear, but so is David's desire to protect him from harm. And this raises an important question about the importance of relationships and community in shaping our moral decisions. So in conclusion, how do we balance the loyalty to leadership and self-preservation? Well, one, as we navigate the complexities of life, especially the dilemma of loyalty and survival, we will inevitably face difficult decisions that require us to weigh our own needs against the obligations of others. Today we've seen that loyalty is not just a feeling or an emotional response, it's a moral imperative that requires us to prioritize the needs and well-beings of others. But it's also, and two, we also see that self-preservation is not always a bad thing. In fact, taking care of ourselves is essential for living in a meaningful and purposeful life. As much as possible, we should submit to leaders God specifically placed in our lives. And in the face of a life-threatening danger, we should make a decision to preserve our life. And of course, you see somebody out there drowning, I mean, you should do everything you can to save their life, even if it means giving your life. I'm talking about something dark. If somebody's going down wants you to go down this dark place, you have the ability and should choose your own life over choosing to go and follow somebody blindly. God always has a plan for us and to take care of everything. And the key is relying on the Lord's divine wisdom and finding that balance between the loyalty of leadership and self-preservation. And some last thoughts. Unlike the Israelites who never chose a king, here in the Philippines and in America, we're both republics. And we get to choose leaders by voting from the lowest level to the highest level. From this story, we should recognize that choosing leaders that have godly character and make sound biblical decisions is very important. It's not just about who can do the job, but it's who can do the job with integrity, morality, and justice. Still, once a leader is in place, let's be gracious, understanding that there is no perfect leader, unless it's, of course, the millennium and Jesus is the king. But the God who placed the leaders is a perfect God.